Well, that happened a lot faster than I was prepared for. I was in the back, and I was like, oh, wow, we're already to the part where I come back. So you are all completely forgiven for not having enough time to get on my level as I get started here. It hit me quickly as well. So I feel like I'm showing up here at a bit of a disadvantage. See, the talk that I'm doing right now, I was supposed to do like a month ago. And then we got remember when we had all the snow? And we canceled service one week. Maybe some of you didn't realize that because you're kind of once-a-monthers anyway, which is no judgment. But we did that, and so I got bumped to the end, which means I think I was going to be like week 2 or something, and now I'm following Blair and Sean and Cedric and Kim and Tommy, and I know I was like kind of there for Kim and Tommy, but that wasn't super consequential. It's kind of not fair, right? And now I'm following Jordan, who was just up here, and I feel as if I'm being set up for failure, which kind of by extension means y'all are being set up for failure, so be gracious with me. The other tough thing here is it's a relationship series. I'm supposed to talk about love. And I'm an Enneagram 5. And if you're not, someone gets it. Yeah, if you're not familiar with what that means, it means that my relationship with emotions is strained. I don't experience them kind of directly all the time. My contention, it's controversial, is that actually as a 5, and if you're a 5, you can probably affirm this, it's not that I don't feel emotions. It's that I feel them so unbelievably proximate, so oppressively weighty that I've developed an overactive mind in order to keep them at bay. And so, in addition to showing me grace, because I am not any of those people who spoke before me who are excellent and awesome, show me grace as well, because I'm having to overcome the best parts of myself in order to be authentic with you this morning. Because here's the thing, it turns out that it's rather difficult to come up with something original to say about love. So I decided to say something non-original. I decided to steal something from one of my favorite television shows, Fleabag. Hopefully some of you have seen it. It goes like this. Love is awful. It's awful. It's painful. It's frightening. Makes you doubt yourself, judge yourself. Makes you distance yourself from the people in your life. Makes you selfish. Makes you creepy. Makes you obsessed with your hair. Love makes you cruel. Love makes you say and do things you never thought you would do. It's all any of us want, and it's hell when we get it. And so it's no wonder that it's not something we want to do on our own. I was taught that if you're born with love, then life is about choosing the right place to put it. People talk about that a lot. It feeling right. If it feels right, then it's easy. But I don't think that's true. It takes strength to know what's right. And love isn't something that weak people do. Being a romantic takes a hell of a lot of hope. What I think they mean is when you find someone you love, it feels like hope. If you take nothing else away from me this morning, this is me talking now, not Adam Scott and Phoebe Waller-Bridge. If you take nothing else from me this morning, watch Fleabag. I might say nothing else of consequence this morning, but you'll remember, he told us to watch that show on Amazon. We should go do that. You should go do that. It's excellent. But I also love what I just said, which remember, I didn't come up with, someone else did. I love what I just said because I think it's profoundly true. We do like to romanticize, idealize the notion of love. You know, we've certainly commercialized it. Just did that this past week. But when push comes to shove, I think love is a lot messier than we often like to think. And this has been true throughout history, if we reflect on the different definitions of love. English is one of those weird languages where we kind of just bunch it all up into one word, love. Most other languages and cultures throughout history have a kaleidoscope, a vernacular when it comes to describing love, because they know that one word doesn't completely encompass it. If you grew up in any kind of evangelical church, then you probably heard, that in the Greek, there's multiple words for love. There's this one that means like brotherly love. It's like phileo, where we kind of get Philadelphia, city of brotherly love, kind of a friendship type love. There's eros. You all know what that is. Kind of the more erotic variety. And then there's agape, which is, God's love, this transcendent thing, whatever, I don't know. Point is, it doesn't fit cleanly into our linguistic boxes. And of course, that's not the only, talking about the Greek isn't the only way that the Bible addresses love. Some of you have probably been to a wedding before. Maybe it was yours. And there's a decent chance, probably better than 40%, that 1 Corinthians 13 was read. Paul's reflections on love. Beautiful passage. It's a shame that it gets used too often because I think we take it for granted. There's a lot of good stuff there. Not what I want to talk about, however. What I think is perhaps the most terrifying, truly frightening, truly disarming passage about love in the Bible is the one in 1 John where it says that God is love. People talk about often in a misinformed, unintentionally anti-Semitic way about how the God of the Old Testament is a monster at times, and usually this is just a misunderstanding of ancient literature and things like that. Can be forgiven, but I want to contend this morning that perhaps the most terrifying text about God in the Bible is this one in 1 John. Because if love is anything like what I described in my little Fleabag monologue a moment ago, to say that God is that, well, that's something else entirely. So what are the implications of God being love if love is, in fact, awful and frightening and painful and makes us obsessed with our hair? What does that God look like? And maybe more importantly, what does our being made in that God's image mean when it comes to the way that we love one another? Because I want to suggest to you, rather boldly perhaps, that kind of these two poles kind of feed into each other. The more that our notion of love is complicated, the more our notion of God is complicated, which then complicates the way that we show up together. Now, something that came up last week as I was up here with my friends Kim and Tommy talking about queer love is the fact that my friend Kim, who is married to my friend Larissa, their marriage is no more or less biblical than my marriage to my wife, Amy. And what I mean by that is we often sort of anachronistically, retroactively, fictitiously, we read in a certain notion of contemporary love, contemporary marriage, contemporary relationships, what we think to be right, what we want to be true about ourselves. We read it back into the Bible and then sort of spin around and act like it's what God ordained. But like I said last week, my marriage is no more or less biblical than Kim's or any of yours. Some of you aren't married. My relationship status is no more or less biblical than yours either. All of us are doing contemporary relationships because we live now here in the 21st century in a very alien culture relative to that of the Bible. There's a weird big word for this, big even for me. That's supposed to be funny. Thank you. The word is simulacra. It means it's something that is fake. It's fictitious that we then mimic in real life, thinking that it was true at one point. That's a bad description. I'll try to do better. Maybe a good example of this is kind of the source of what we understand romantic love to be these days. This is probably not the whole story, but at least a partial aspect of that story is something that originated maybe in 11th century France. This idea of courtly love. And what courtly love was this idea that, you had a lady, not just like someone who identifies as female, but like a lady, like the opposite of a lord, because it was very patriarchal, and the ladies couldn't be lords themselves. Haven't we progressed? And you have a lady who was married to a lord, circumstantially, politically, something about big tracts of land. And what would happen was the lady would fall in love with the knight, or the knight would fall in love with the lady, and there was this forbiddenness to their love, and we wrote stories and poems about it. In fact, that's what happened is these poets would come along and describe this courtly love, how they would yearn for each other and things like that, but they couldn't be together because of rules and things. And then at the climax of the film about it, something would happen, and the circumstances would change, and they would get to be together, and it was so romantic and beautiful. Here's what many scholars now think, historian-type scholars. They don't think that actually was really how it was happening. In fact, they think that this was an invention of, novelists and poets and artists and things like that, which then became so romanticized and idealized that it became true. So this thing that was supposed to be about what was true is actually fictitious, which then became so popular that it kind of became this weird loop of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then fast forward to our time, and we've decided that is some version of that. We've turned it into the romantic comedy, made Matthew McConaughey a very rich man, and now have read that back in the Bible, and then kind of lorded it over ourselves and others, and kind of said, if you don't have some version of this, then you're not doing what God designed for you. It's made up. So if that's not what love means, what does it mean? I am, in addition to being a student of theology, which is a lot of fun, I'm a student of psychoanalysis, which is even more fun and a little more controversial, it turns out. Freud and weird stuff like that. But I actually think psychoanalysis and theology make beautiful bedfellows. And one of the fascinating things about psychoanalysis when it comes to love is psychoanalysis is obsessed with this idea of lack. The basic theory is this, that when we enter into the world, we enter into language. We enter into a relationship with the reality around us that is mediated. And what that means is we don't have direct access to the world. This is not the right thing for me to pick up because I actually don't know what the word for this thing is. I don't know what this is, Tommy. But regardless of whatever this doohickey is, I don't have direct access to it. My experience of it is mediated through words, through language, through symbols. And this separation, here's a better example, pen. This isn't, what does it mean to say this is a pen? It's a word. The word is doing its best to approximate, and even in doing so, it's kind of just ruling out other words. By saying this is a pen, I'm saying it's not an apple. I don't think I'm making sense, but I'm just going to press forward. The point is that because we experience the world symbolically, we have this sense of distance, this alienation between us and the world, most crucially a kind of alienation between ourselves and others, the people in our lives. We experience it as this desire, this longing to fill something at the core of our being, and so we identify objects. This is where we get the notion of objectification. We identify objects. Sometimes those objects are people that we believe will satiate, satisfy, fill our lack. I made a reference to this a number of months ago. The Donut Repair Club, it's this cheesy Christian thing that I grew up watching. None of you had heard of it, which blew my mind. Made me feel as if I lived a very sheltered childhood. But the point of it was, the illustration was you had a donut, and then, this was meant to represent you, and the hole in the middle of the donut was like you without Jesus, and Jesus was the donut hole, and now, you feel it? No one really puts donut holes in the middle of donuts, in my experience, and so I think it was a bad metaphor. Now we're having fun, thank you. But the point, I think, was actually profound, this idea that we are constantly searching for the thing And the thing is usually the person to fill this primordial kind of fundamental gap that we fill. And so, what I think I want to say about that is that I think we get it a little wrong in our approach. And so I kind of want to say three things about this notion of love and lack, kind of building off a number of things, building off this psychoanalytic idea of lack, building off this completely fictitious notion of romantic love that many of us have adopted, and building off this terrifying claim in the book of 1 John that God is, in fact, love. So three things. The first thing is that I think that all of our attempts to domesticate love, and there are many examples of that throughout human history, monogamy, non-monogamy. I think monogamy and non-monogamy kind of encompass all of it, but then of course, those things have taken, monogamy, marriage, like I've already intimated, marriage has meant 72,000 different things over the course of human history. And then as some of my good friends could tell you, within the broad spectrum of non-monogamy, you have lots of new words that many of you are currently unfamiliar with, but which we plan on educating you regarding in the near future. So all of these constructs, all of these ways of showing up in relationship with one another are an attempt to domesticate the gravity of love that I think those words from the Emmy Award-winning show Fleabag, I think, capture so poignantly. And they do so unsuccessfully. Oftentimes when one version of this domestication, in our culture it's usually monogamous heterosexual marriage, when it becomes too rote, when it becomes too commonplace, too taken for granted, that's when we often begin to feel as if it's become oppressive, and in many instances it probably has, and that's when something new, something real, something excellent breaks forth, and really all that's happening is it's a betrayal of sorts, a betrayal of the reality that, try as we might, we can't ever fully domesticate love because, and I think this is what the passage in 1 John gets at, is there is something transcendent about it. There is something infinite about it. And that infinite thing, whatever it may be, is actually, I would argue, deeply related to this notion of lack, this notion of loss that is at the core of our beings. More on that in a moment. Because what I think is going on with these attempts, these failed attempts at domestication, is a navigation of sorts. A navigation, this is the second thing, a navigation amidst the relationship between love and something else that is very, very close to love, fantasy. And I've said some version of this in the past, but like I said, you once a monthers probably weren't here, so this will be you hearing it for the first time. But what fantasy does in relation to love, fantasy does this. I'll put it this way. Fantasy takes the thing, remember, the thing that we think is going to fill our lack. It takes the thing, the object, the person, the job, the relationship, the iPhone, whatever. It takes it and it says, this thing, I'll use my phone as an object lesson. People are texting me. This thing is not that. I want the thing that I think is going to fulfill me. You can fill in the blank for what it is, all of you know. But when I get it, this thing that I've been desiring, this thing that I've been fantasizing about, this is not that. Because that thing, that is the thing that is actually going to fulfill me. That person, that recognition, that device, that thing is the thing that will actually fill me. And so fantasy is constantly taking us on this circuitous route towards loss. And I think there's something profound about that because there's some unconscious acknowledgement that it is in fact not just life, but also loss that animates us. Which is why we can't ever entirely escape fantasy. The challenge is orienting ourselves responsibly towards it. Entering into the proper relationship with fantasy, and I think that's what love is. Because love comes along and it says, no, this is that. And hopefully some of you have found something more profound to love than your iPhone. Because what's going on with love is another big 50-cent word, called sublimation. It's taking this thing, this imperfect thing, this messy thing, this broken thing, this lacking thing, and saying, no, this thing, this person, perhaps. And for many of you, this person should hopefully be you, at least at some point in your life. This is that. It's elevating the finite to the level of the infinite. And so if monogamy, non-monogamy, marriage, coupling, what is that thing that Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow did? Ethical decoupling, I don't know, whatever. All of these attempts are attempts to domesticate the fires of love. Then love itself is an attempt to humanize the pitfalls of fantasy. Building off that further, this is point 3, and I think this is the most profound and scandalous and most important thing that I could possibly say about love this morning, is that it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I don't mean that cynically. This is where hope comes in. This is what the priest, the hot priest, he doesn't actually have a name in Fleabag, he's just literally labeled on the credits as hot priest. This is what the hot priest meant when he said that when you find someone you love, it feels like hope. Because hope is this, I think, often misunderstood thing. Hope isn't a naive expectation in spite of all possible evidence to the contrary. No, more crucially, hope takes very seriously the ingredients of cynicism. Hope welcomes that doubt, that pessimism, that struggle into its existence, into its constellation of being. Hope says, no, bring it all on. Nevertheless, hope is very foolish in that way. In literature, in fantasy, the genre type, not the psychoanalytic type, hope is often associated with the trickster or the fool, because it's hope against the prospect of total failure. In fact, it's hope amidst the reality of total failure. And so in my mind, the most important, the most romantic, the most courageous thing that we could say about love, kind of as these 3 points build upon each other, is that love ultimately fails. And the way that it fails, and this is key, I think key not only for us this morning, but key in the way that we reflect upon what it means to say that God is love, is that it fails to satiate the lack. No love, no realization of fantasy, no accumulation or acquisition of any sort will ever put out the fire of that desire. You can't domesticate it. It will constantly be experienced as the French word is jouissance. There are kids in the room, so I won't tell you what that translates to. Typically in English, it's translated as enjoyment, which I think is where we get our notion of joy from. Because joy isn't the same thing as happiness. Happiness is pleasure. It's fleeting. I don't want to demean happiness. Happiness is great. Don't worry. Be happy. But happiness is different than joy. Joy is more akin to hope, more akin to love. Joy takes seriously loss. It's a kind of posture of nevertheless in the face of deep pain. Richard Rohr talks about transformation, talks about growth, talks about transcendence happening at the intersection of deep love and deep pain. That's what joy is. That's what enjoyment is. And so there is some profound sense, I think, on the divine's side of things, on God's side of things, and maybe then by extension as his image bearers, our side of things that says, no, to be like God is to experience the depth and breadth of our mere humanity, not our divinity, or rather what we fantasize divinity to be, some sort of imagined, arbitrary wholeness, fulfillment, but rather in making us in God's image, God actually brought into the divine, or maybe defined as divine, the very finite messiness that we experience as lacking humanity. That whatever it means to be infinite is not to be whole or fulfilled in the sense that I'm talking about, not this sort of utopian notion of things just kind of going on good, happy forever in perpetuity, but rather this depth of existence, this joy, this pleasure that we suffer. Because crucially, we suffer it together. There is maybe a sense in which we can't be together, we can't experience one another without this joyful, hopeful, beautiful pain that's called love. And part of what pains me about it, this goes back to the Enneagram 5 thing, is I really want to be able to put it to words. I really want to be able to create a systematic taxonomy for you, to give you terminology, imagery, charts and graphs, concise and precise definitions that illustrate for you what I mean. Because I see it here and I feel it here, but the moment I go to utter it out loud, I feel like I sound like a crazy person. Your knowing chuckles betray your agreement with me. And so, not to belabor it further, and not to find myself frustrated as I continue kind of orbit or circle and attempt to pin down precisely what I'm trying to say, I think I'll land this plane at record time for myself, I might add, with some stories. This week I had not one but two brushes with death. Spoiler alert, it's okay. The first, a little more directly related to me, my grandfather passed away. It's been some time since he and I have had much of a substantial relationship, but there's no drama there. There was no falling out. We both got older, him a little more so than me. And that distance of age led to just normal circumstantial changes in our relationship. I had kids. He developed Alzheimer's and dementia. And so it's been 6 or 7 years at this point since we've had a conversation. And even before then, you know, my grandfather is a simple man, and I don't mean that disparagingly. He lived a good life. But anyway, when he passed away, I found a picture. The last time I had seen him, a picture of him with at the time, my two daughters. I've had a third since then. She never got to meet him. And my youngest, Clara, my middle, she was the youngest at the time. Now she's the middle. My middle daughter, Clara, she was 9 months old when this picture was taken. She has no concrete memories of this man outside of the picture. But when I told her that he had passed away, she just lost it. You know, I mentioned Enneagram 5s and emotions and kind of the weird creative things that we do to not feel them. And there was this poignant moment where you know, my now 6-year-old daughter is just crying, feeling loving deeply over this person who she barely met. And I didn't want to trivialize what she was feeling because but I couldn't help but laugh, smile almost. It was kind of beautiful to me. I was getting to experience a kind of grief vicariously through her. I don't know what love is exactly, but it allowed my daughter to feel something profound about someone who was very, very important to her. In fact, whom she wouldn't exist without, who she almost didn't know at all. A little later in the week, I was running, something I do now. I've been made fun of for saying that. I don't know why. I run the same route every day. And along that route is a little memorial. Sometime before I moved into this neighborhood, something tragic happened on this road. I don't know what it was. Someone's child, someone's daughter passed away. I'm assuming there was an accident of some sort. And I literally pass this every day. And there's a sign, I think, at the beginning of the road that has her name on it. So I see it. I see it almost too frequently to the point where I take it for granted. But this week, and I've been doing this run on and off, more on lately than off, for the better part of 2 years. This has never happened to me before. This week, I think our parents were there. They were changing out the flowers. I run to turn off. I run to turn my brain off, which is very hard for me to do. It's an escape. And in this encounter, I didn't stop. I didn't know what to think or see or feel or say at the moment, so I just awkwardly nodded, kind of saluted, whatever this is, kept right on going. But it stuck with me. To say that God is love, to say that love is God, to probe the divinity of this messy, frightening, painful thing that we yearn for, struggle with, experience together, this thing that aligns our lack with another person, that invites them not to fill it, but to hold it with us. When it comes to this girl and her parents, love couldn't hold off death, but death couldn't extinguish love. And in some sense, it keeps her alive long after she's been gone. I don't know what to do with that beyond just saying simply that we've commercialized love to our detriment. It's not this thing that fills us. It's not this thing that makes us whole, that makes us satisfied. It's not this thing that saves us, at least not in the sense that we typically think. But it is the thing that makes us alive, the thing that makes us most like God, perhaps just like God. It is the thing that in connecting us with God, connects us with one another, or vice versa. And the most profound thing that I can say about love is not that it has the power to keep death at bay, to keep loss at bay, to keep lack at bay, but the inverse of that. That none of life's struggle, none of life's pain, even to the point of death, has the power to extinguish love. And that, to me at least, feels like hope. Wonderful to see you all. Grace and peace.